So go to 1.3, then we can add the budget from this year. And then 4 to 5, we refer to capital grants this year and the previous year. For example, capital money received for the plans in 22-23 been passed on to this year, and then if there might be pushed back to the following year. And then 0.6 additional, just £500,000. This is jointly with other authorities, and the NHA, which the park is part of that. And then number 1.7, we receive additional money of over £200,000. This is going to contribute to schemes that are already there. So the information there will be meet the deficit that we foresee. And then table 2.1 gives a broad outline of the situation. So the original budget and last year, and this reflects the updates at the end of November, and then we have the new environments. And you can see the figure of 108,000 there. This reflects the impact of additional expenditure, £2,000, because of the effect of inflation and salaries that are much higher than were foreseen at the beginning of the year. And then we can move on to number 3, the capital. So the situation at the start of the year and the assets that have been done. A lot of capital schemes have been implemented this year, but not in the original budget over 30. And there'll be details on that, and of course, estimate that. So then 0.4, the forecast position for the rest of this year. The projected projection is what we expect to see from the corporate for the end of the year. And of course, it is a projection, it can change. And with the heads of the end of the year. 4.2. So this summary, at the end of this year, we expect about £20,000 balance. About in November, we're looking at a deficit of over 80,000. So that reason this has changed is because of bank interest. With inflation, of course, the interest rates have increased substantially. So the estimate time about 20,000 additional, but we're over 50,000 this year, and we expect it to be 70,000, which is quite good, of course. The rest of the surplus is from some variety of budget headings. The number of posts are vacant. And then from 4.3 on, there's more detail about the different services and how the over expenditure or under expenditure on them. First of them, 4.3 is, of course, is Plas Tanabulch. The figure, I've already had a report recently, and is still around fairly close to it, and probably a bit smaller, so not so bad. Car parks, of course, it was very good with income over target. Unfortunately, this can't all be considered a surplus because of the situation of other services such as over expenditure and things like collecting litter and so on. So it's difficult to see what that'll be overall. What else? Of course, corporate over expenditure there because of unexpected audit fees, 21-22. a lot of additional work on those that year, so additional fee. And you see, already noticed the wardens and the considerable underexpend there. And these are posts that have been vacant, staff on maternity and so on. So going on to 4.4, planning and land management. So the planning expect an under expenditure, significant under expenditure there. This is because of savings from job vacancies during the year. The post of the head of the service is empty. So this, and then difference there. These savings haven't all been achieved this year, so there's a slippage into next year, but we're trying to resolve that and the structure of planning posts next year. Rysgwrn, as some of you are aware of articles in the press yesterday in the Daily Post, and note this situation. And so the over expenditure and the income hasn't been, predicted income hasn't been adapted for some years. And so lack of income reflects a lot of this, and the over expenditure, mainly with the heating system problems have been there. We've had to spend to adapt that. And of course, the systems weren't used, and there's much more expenditure on gas, and that's taken a lot of energy. 4.6, as I've already mentioned, the 4% original provision was insufficient with expenditure and with inflation, so another £84,000 has been needed to spend to fill that gap. Item 7, interest, I've already mentioned this. The original target was only £8,000, and at the end of January, it did 51,000 now. So, and when we expect another further 20,000, so this is very heartening, very encouraging. And 4.8, this just gives into detail about the expenditure on capital and the high expenditure on these this year. And then 4.9 is just an estimate of the expenditure at the end of the year. And these figures, of course, can change. A lot of these plans, not specifically for this, and they're also previous years, any specific, and this some slippage there in expenditure. 0.5 then details about the environments, the budgets, and the only thing I want to note there is the movement of £70,000 from one capital expenditure to another, and then just hope that you'll approve the report and note the current financial situation for 22-23. Thank you very much for the report, and thank you for all the work on the budget. It's a lot of difficulties for the whole country, the whole of Britain. Are there any questions? There are people queuing up. The other people think about questions. Okay. Okay, thank you, David. First of you, as you say, can I thank David? He has stepped into the gap during Sian's maternity leave. He's done excellent work. And I would like to add to the thanks from the chairman. So it's good. So for information, this report update this year, which is almost finished, doesn't it, the financial year? So 22-23 comes to an end in a week's time, but there are movements here since September was the last, November was the last update, and the main updates that are different then is the lower expenditure on the vacancies, job vacancies that have been frozen through, and the fact we've been able to attract higher interest, just like many other organizations, interest has gone up. So anybody who has a certain of cash flow in hand, it helps and then get a bit more interest coming in. And this is now 11 months into the year, and I'll give you a quiz now. You're not allowed to answer. How many months are there in an accountant's year? 10, 11, 13. the 13 because we still account for expenditure after the end of the year in April, sometimes into May, which is spent against the old year and thrown back. So although there's only a week left, there's still some more expenditure against this period. So there will be an opportunity for some further change. I think the situation is fair to say by now that there are no other major surprises to come. So we're going to finish the year in a good position. The situation for 23-24, which isn't under consideration here, and well, this and also the long-term strategy is still challenging, but grants that the chief executive have mentioned before, one-off grants do help to ease the pain in the coming years. And this will make it more challenging for an accountant to set the budget to try to get heads around all this at the moment. We want to get on to close the accounts, but no, the situation is satisfactory enough for 22-23. Thank you, David. So John Pugh. Thank you very much. And thank you to everybody for your patience. You can see the plus has been thing on the budget for a while. It looks similarly that Erasgwn is going to be a problem. 32,000 overspent this year. What will it be next year and the year after? I've been asking for some years, is there a financial 5-year plan for Erasgwn? So we need a 5-year plan. You need a plan. You put things higher, you put this into expenditure, but you can't take these places and run them at a loss and be a drain on other things. So they have to stand on their own 2 feet. So I'm asking again, please, can we look in through a 5-year plan for the Erasgwn in the next 5 years? Do you want me to reply to that? John, there is a business plan. It's not a 5-year, but it's a 3-year. And part of the visible deficit is down to me because we are in a situation where the Welsh government has promised revenue funding to us to run Erasgwn. I don't see a lot of point in showing that we can run Erasgwn within our budget. So it shows a loss, and so we can get the message over to the Welsh government. And we're having discussions with several ministers. They've all said, yes, money is available, but it's never come. It's a matter after this year, I think, we have to get robust predictions for Erasgwn. Like every other, we have substantial balances for Erasgwn. The Erasgwn did so well in the first 3 or 4 years. We knew that this would be a fall off after that period. So the COVID period made it worse. But we have definite plans to move forward. So this, John, will and the members will be part of the discussion of the future of Erasgwn. Says, yes, I happen to be passing on Sunday and Plasable, and it was absolutely packed. It was on top of the wonderful, but despite COVID, well, why can't we attract, to me, this sort of thing with the Oakley? There's something wrong in the situation with some private things can attract visitors and the authority can't. That's it. Thank you. Joe, next.
Thank you. A similar vein to John. Obviously, we're losing worrying amounts of money from Plas Tân y Bwlch. Is it ever going to be offloaded?
Yuan? Well, we met the Plas group after this committee, and we're not considering that as an option at the moment. Okay. So the only thing I can say is that we are meeting as a board, the Plas Tân y Bwlch board, after this meeting, and we will be part of these discussions, discussing and considering every option for the future of Plas Tanabulch. Thank you, Johan. Yeah, all right, Joe? Are you happy with the answer you've received? Yes, I take it that she is.
Yeah, that's fine.
Edgar and then Jonathan went after that. Yes, it's looking good to me, and we're quite close to the end of the month. I don't see what we can do other than accept the recommendation, and so I propose that. Thank you. One or two other people want to speak, and then we'll come back to Jonathan. Yes, thank you. Just very quickly on John's point, there will be a report coming in front of the authorities committee, which will go into more detail and the plan for Ysgol over the next 3 years. I think one of the articles in the press yesterday was misleading in terms of the content. And I think we also have a responsibility, and it's worth going to the press to celebrate things that are happening in Ysgol. If you go to this Ysgol yesterday, it doesn't help us that we try to attract jobs and recruiting at the moment. It doesn't help like that, but there's particularly good things are happening there. And if you look at the Ysgol straight after COVID, it looked quite negative. The figures have improved substantially in the last year. We are quite confident that there will be a further improvement this year. And the exhibition, this will be something particularly in this year good. A lot of positive things are happening there too. And there's a responsibility. We have a responsibility to celebrate and make the most of this. Yes, I'm not worried too much about Ysgol. And there's also bearing in mind what Emma said too earlier. We have to show this and be positive about this. And, you know, we all know how special, what a special place it is. Although it's not going to, never going to be an Alton Towers. We're not going to attract huge crowds it's a different sort of attraction. It's important that we convey that. Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan. And when? As you know, Elfed, I got a call from the BBC on Sunday of all days asking, could I give an interview on Monday morning about Ysgol? And I said, we haven't even discussed Ysgol in Eryri. There's nothing like this. And so I refused to give an interview with them. I got a phone call on Monday, then another one, and I refused. I don't know where you stand doing an interview now. I tried to contact yesterday. I phoned back, but there's no answer. You did a interview. There was nothing on the radio. I'm sure that we can raise this point. Yes, I spoke. I got a call on Sunday as well, and I asked about what did they base their story. Yes, and it was a document that had dated, and it's a story on Monday. But they ran the story anyway, and then I had to respond on Monday, and we got our heads together and did a very good interview. Yes, I saw that. And I felt that what was in the Daily Post yesterday was extremely misleading. All right, thank you for that. Thank you, Chair. And thank you for raising that. In a committee, 2 committees back, Tim and I were sitting, and on the same, and the financial challenge, and but because we wanted to have a meeting to discuss the Plas first, and the great impact on Plas Bulk has on the rest of our finances. Fine, thank you very much. Helen wants to come in. Thank you. Yes, just on Anwen's point, in terms of the communication element and all the stories that have been in the press in the last few days, you know, welcome. If you get a call from the press, just pass it on straight to us in the communication team and we'll deal with it, because it can be terrible trying to get a response immediately. And the team can help on that side to find out exactly what the stories they're looking for. I think the other point to make is a lot of stories have been picked up from the papers and a misunderstanding on how the risk profile works, misinterpretation of what has been put in the papers. So the team has been very busy over the last 2 days trying to get articles corrected and so on. But the trouble is, once the story is out there, the story is out there, isn't it? We do our best to try to tidy up the mess. Thank you. Thank you very much, Helen. Thank you. Fine. It's sometimes difficult, but we can work with the department and do our best for the park. So can I just make one other point on this format? I've got used to money at the end of the year when coming into the authority. So our settlement is flat for 4 years. There's an understanding by officers and the minister that the minister will help us out as they can. And the way they've done it this year is, as can be seen in paragraph 1.7, to £200,000 of revenue. And we have just had 30,000 this week of revenue. The understanding is that we use this money to respond to the challenge next year. So between the two, we have a pot to meet the, it's a sly way of running the authority, but at the end of the year, we get money for next year. It's important then that you understand how we use the situation, but it really does take the pressure off us as an authority getting these grants at the last minute, perhaps, but it is a story. So just this understanding. So if you read these reports under pressure, is that true? Is that correct? Unfortunately, it looks as if we're sitting on a lot of money at the end of the year, but the fact is we need that for running the show next year. There we are. So just one other point, and I always say how important it is to have balances, reserves. So we have them not just for the next year, but if we're in a situation, if we get a shock, so if there's an increase in costs. Thank you, Edgar. Thank you. Edgar has proposed that we accept the recommendation. Is everyone happy with that? There we are. So everyone agreed. Thank you very much. And thank you to the finance team. Thank you very much. There we are. On to item 6, the authority's risk profile. And Johan, you're going to be introducing this. Yes, thank you very much. Well, the background of the situation, the story, the risks that facing the authority, and they're put into 3 categories: high, medium, and low priority. And then in paragraph 1.2 on, there's a summary of the changes that have happened since the last time that we considered the risks, and that was on the 16th of November. And this is a report that comes before this committee regularly, and we report annually on the authority's risks. And you can see the proposal is to remove risk 13 and from the register, because now a country is in a stable COVID situation, and we've noted that it's possible to go back, take this off we can always put it back on the risk registration if the situation deteriorates. Yes, so Dr. Edgar is bringing you a drink. Thank you. Also in paragraph 1.5, we suggest that risk 5 moves from high risk to medium risk, and on the table 1.6, you can see the target income generation target for Plas Tanna Bwlch. This risk has increased, and so there are 7 in the appendix is mention of risk, the 7 risks that have increased. Although the income has increased during the year, it's true to say that substantial inflation that's hit the country and energy costs of heating, that this has been more than the increase in income. And so, as was previously reported, the situation is slightly better than it was a few months ago, but from our point of view, this risk is a substantial one, and something that we as a board are considering. So the recommendation is that to remove risk 13, that is the effect of COVID-19 on the national park and on the authorities' work, from the risk register, and then to note the contents of this report. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ewan. Does anyone have any comments or question? Tim? 2 points I'd like to make, Mr. Chair. One, Plas Tanna Bwlch. I must say that I think that the risk is more than just income and financial sustainability, the whole situation in Plas Tanna Bwlch. I think we need to bring this into the risk. So on this one, and just something else. On 13, including COVID at the moment, is it worth expanding this to include things like the flu pandemic or foot and mouth for the long term, because we need to manage risks. COVID has happened recently. We've had foot and mouth in previous things. There's possibly a flu pandemic in the future. So managing the risk I think, is something we need to think about for a long time. That's Ewan, do you want to respond to that? Yes, I'm not sure what we can do as an authority about the risk, such risks. So we have a disaster recovery plan. We can expand on that in that. So the 2 sorts of pandemics that affect people and pandemics that affect animals and birds. And I think, yeah. Yes, fine. Okay, thank you, Tim. Anybody else have any comments? So just go back to Plas Tanna Bwlch. There is a risk 17. To make sure that the long-term future of Plas Tanna Bwlch, which relates to other issues. So there's a risk 2, but risk 17 is less because we've got more time. So this is a level of risk. So yes, I mentioned 70, I noted 17, but I'm worried about these risks, about the situation. Thank you, Tim. So fine. So can everybody show that you're happy with the recommendation? Change of translator.
Strategaeth Hybu'r Gymraeg a croeso
On
i
to item number 7, Welsh Language Promotion Strategy, and welcome Bethan to introduce this item. Welcome Bethan. For those of you who were present in the members working group in December, you'll remember seeing a draft of this strategy. You'll see from the front report that it's gone out to consultation since then, and the steering group has met and have considered the responses received and have agreed to some minor amendments to the strategy. So here's the strategy in final form. I'd like to take this opportunity really to thank members of the steering group for their input in creating the strategy. I won't say any more. All of the information is included in the strategy and the strategy is attached. I'm happy to accept any suggestions and comments or any questions that you may have. Otherwise, as you can see, the recommendation is to approve the strategy and publish it on our website. Thanks, Bethan, and thanks for the work that's gone into these substantial documents. It's crucial that we promote the language in our areas and in the park. Does anybody have any questions for Bethan? Kim, then Tim. I just wanted to pick up on one thing quickly. I noticed yesterday on page 90, we're saying establishing the Welsh language as a business language. I don't know, it's normalise and establish. Should the English be establish or normalise? I don't know what your thoughts are on that. Bethan?
Holi Catrin ella rhan cyfieithu beth sa'n addas, ond ia, dwi derbyn ma chydig bach o wahanol o ddiffiniad yn y Gymraeg a Saesneg lle.
Ie, jyst dwi'n gwybod, nes i eisiau gofod fyny mol, dwi'n gwybod os di normalise gair cywir, dwi'n siŵr.
Iawn.
Diolch Bethan.
Iawn, diolch.
Thank you. Thanks, Kim. Tim? Oh, misunderstanding. I thought you wanted to say something about the strategy. This is a substantial document and I really like it. It's crucially important for the Welsh language. So the recommendation is to approve the attached Welsh language promotion strategy and authorize the head of admin and customer care to publish it on the authority's website. Can we have a show of hands, please, that you agree? Everybody in agreement? Unanimously? Thanks once again, Bethan, for the work on that project. On to the item 8 now, freedom of information. Bethan, you're reporting on this one once again? Yes, I am. So this is the annual report that outlines the requests that came to hand last year through the Freedom of Information Act and the Environmental Information Regulations. You can see the details in the report and the types of requests made and how they will dealt with. Once again, I'm happy to receive any questions or comments that you may have. Otherwise, it's for information only and to note the report, the content of the report. Thank you, Bethan. Does anybody have any questions or observations to make? Everybody happy with that? So all we need to do is to approve the recommendation. Everybody in agreement? Thank you very much. On to item 9, the annual report for year 2022, communications and engagement strategy, performance indicators. Welcome, Helen, to report on this. Thank you. Yes, this is the annual report on the targets in the communication and engagement strategy. So the strategy was established in 2021, sets out how we communicate and engage with our ambassadors. Just to give you a bit of background with regard to the purpose of the strategy that was established in 21, what we're trying to do is to get people to better understand the special qualities. One, for example, is the Welsh language and the way in we communicate, engage with people, how we get them to understand more that the Welsh language is a special part of the national park, especially from a visitor perspective. We're looking at building relationships with stakeholders and partners in the way that we engage and communicate. We're also looking at building on the understanding of what the park is and what the challenges are that we face, such as the effects of tourists, climate change, and so on. The strategy is really important in the sense that on building the good name of the park. One example is if people see the authority as somebody who has a good reputation and somewhere where they'd like to work, that attracts more people to work for the park. And this is something that we've started to see over the past year. That is people being interviewed and saying, I've seen the good work that the park does, and it's an organization that I want to work for. So that makes a difference. We want to also encourage more people to care for the park. We want people to think how they visit and respect the area when they come here. If people are willing to volunteer for the park and so forth. So it's a whistle-stop tour, really, of what's included in the report. It's an annual report. We set targets for ourselves within the strategy, and this report states how we're performing against those targets. What we're aiming for in relation to the new strategy is that we're putting more focus on how we communicate rather than just splurging our communications. We're being more targeted towards the audiences that we want to reach. We've thought about how we use our resources differently, be that the budgets that we have for communication or the team itself or everybody else who works in the park, and also the ambassadors that we can use to communicate our messages on our behalf. What channels we used is the emphasis on a story that's in the press. We are using Twitter, Facebook. Everybody's heard about TikTok in the past few weeks. Also, we're trying to bring and engage people in the stories rather than saying this is what the park's doing, this is what's important. We're trying to engage people because that's how we get people involved when something's more personal and there's a bit of a story and context. So headlines really regarding where we're at in relation to the targets this year. The 5 things that I'd like to underline really. Things have increased massively from when we started doing things differently in 2019. So the engagement team have now been established for 4 years, and you can see from the figures when you compare 2019 where we're at now in 2022, the increase in what we do is huge. Somewhere to look perhaps in the report is on page 94 in your papers, or page 24 in the actual appendix itself. What you'll see is that there's quite an increase there in the number of messages we post on social media, and with the same resources. In 2019, it was now 104. By 2022, it's 3,000 odd. So it reflects how things have changed in the way that we communicate. On the next page, we have the next example, the total number of times that we engage with people. And this is on the social media, how many people like different elements or respond to something that we've posted on social media. In 2019, the total was 88,000, but by now we're on 248,000. So there's a phenomenal increase there. We were pretty enthusiastic when we set out the targets. We set out the targets just after the COVID period. And as you know, the communication team were extremely busy during COVID with everything that was going on in the park. So we had a bit of a blip where these social media grew phenomenally during COVID, and now we're starting to level out to normality by now. So what we've learned really by setting the targets during that time was we need to be a bit more realistic with regard to the growth over the next few years now that we're back to some form of normality. Another thing that I'd like to draw your attention to is capacity. I think the whole report refers to the fact that we've been able to do things differently and better, and we've increased our numbers just by that, but there will be capacity issues during the next year. The officer that we've got in post temporarily with Welsh Government funding has been in place for 2 years, undertaking the new website duties. His contract is coming to an end in July, so that's going to create an issue. And I know the management team and myself are working on that to try and resolve that issue at the moment. And obviously, as you know, I'll be leaving the park at the end of April. So once again, that's an issue. But once again, the management team are preparing for the future in relation to that. And I think what's important to remember is we've created a really good foundation here, and we have fantastic skills internally among our officers. If you look, for example, at the difference between the campaign of the summer in 2021, where we used internal skills, and that didn't cost us very much at all. And that look at the campaign for 2022, where we worked with the other two parks and used external agencies with money from Visit Wales. Although the results were good with the agency, we did get higher results using our own internal team. So the lesson to be learned there is we can do brilliant things with the skills that we have internally. And as we develop our staff further, we can do more and more, and we can do that in a way that creates value for money. But we need to be realistic regarding what we can achieve with just the staff that we have, which is 2 to 3 members. So there is a ceiling to that. So really, highlights from the past year and things for you to note. Obviously, we've launched our new website, which is we're very excited about that. I'm really glad with how it happens. It looks really slick. We rebranded it. We've had really good feedback, and things are now much easier to find. Obviously, there are a few tweaks that are ongoing, but what we were trying to achieve with the website was to show more about the suite of things that makes the park special, from heritage, language to wildlife, and the sense of place, and the photos that we use to do that conveys that much better. A lot of staff training has been going on. We don't just use the communication team to communicate, we use everybody across the authority, including you as members. And so the training offered and our staff is really clear about what messages should be conveyed and the way that they come over in media. I think that can be seen in the way that they perform. the work on with the names Wyddfa and Eryri. If you go to page 88 in the report, and page 18 in the report itself, but you can see what the most popular posts were last year, and the ones on the names Wyddfa and Eryri were the ones that drew the most attention in the past 10 years in the park. It drew more attention than we changed Pen-y-Pass to pre-book, and that did get a lot of attention, but it was really positive as well, and that's what's really important to emphasize. By the end of the day, the team stood back from social media because there were so many people on the social media who were emphasizing how brilliant the decision was. And although there have been one or two might have been negative about the change, there was so much push from the positive side of things. It overcame anything negative, and that's been fantastic for the park's profile, and we should be really proud of that change. Obviously, there's still work that needs to be done in order to deliver everything in relation to the names, but fantastic work undertaken by the whole of the park in relation to that. I've talked about the 22 campaign already. What we've learned with working with agencies, there are one or two things that we did differently in working with them. For example, we were able to pay for articles in the Daily Post. We were using influencers for the first time ever. So we're going to learn from those elements, the same that we did with working with external agencies, and reflect that in what we're doing in the campaign for 2022, but we'll be doing that internally. Like I mentioned, I think we already have the skills, really good skills internally. Johan Gwilym will be leading on the campaign in 22. Eryri ni, our Eryri. So lastly, just things to emphasize in 2022, the ambassador scheme, where we use external businesses. They're able to become park ambassadors. There are modules online. There are badges and stickers that you can get from being an ambassador. There are nearly 800 ambassadors now. And essentially, we have 800 people out there telling people about the park and all of the messages that I've been referring to in the communication and engagement strategy. So that's really powerful. So we mustn't think that's just us that can contribute to the way that we communicate and engage. Another thing, the park's podcasts. If you haven't already listened to that, a podcast goes out on a monthly basis, and we talk to different characters. That's become really popular, and we're always looking for interesting stories, interesting people to interview. So if you do have any ideas, please get in touch with Johan Gwilym about that. So the recommendations, I refer to things that we will be tweaking or doing slightly differently this year. The summer campaign will be undertaken internally. We're going to put more emphasis on the special qualities which are not being as apparent as you may want them at the moment. We're going to work on increasing Instagram, but when I wrote this report, we talked about increasing the TikTok audience as well, but I think we should take a step back from that as a result of the news the past couple of weeks in relation to TikTok. We're looking at capacity. I'm working more with the planning department and with PLAS regarding what we can do to send out positive messages about planning and work more to increase our ambassadors and our volunteer capacity. So as you can see from the recommendation, I'd like you to examine and discuss the annual report, and I am happy to take any questions that you may have. Thank you. Thanks, Helen. Once again, thank you. Thanks for your work. really interesting statistics in the report as well. Thanks to you and the team for the hard work that you undertake. It's open to the floor now. Dilwyn, first of all. First of all, can I thank Helen for the report? What crossed my mind, although I'm not sure where I'm supposed to face with the mics. Anyway, what we saw from the report, there's an opportunity for people to volunteer, young and older people in the park. But what I'd like to know, I'm just asking the question, how many opportunities do you as officers have in secondary schools in Conwy to promote the opportunities that there are? And do you feel that there is enough awareness? I can think of a couple of schools in Dyffryn Conwy, and some of them live within the park, and I'm just asking really, do you feel that they're aware enough of the career opportunities that there are for them? Thanks, Dilwyn. Two things there, really. There's work ongoing across the authority with regard to engaging with schools. In the past, we did it specifically through the formal education section, but now it's something that all officers are encouraged to do, which is great because people get a taste of the different things that the park do, especially in relation to the projects that are ongoing. We do have officers who go to the Welsh Jobs Fair in Bangor University. I'm not aware of anything specific that we do in regard to careers in schools, but I'll note that, and because that's an interesting point you've made there. Thanks very much, Helen. Dilwyn. Delys, next.
Helen, diolch yn fawr am yr adroddiad.
Thanks for the report, Helen. It's a brilliant report. And coming from this background myself, I can really sympathize with your struggle with capacity. Well, we're living in a 24/7, always on culture, and you have to provide content that means that we're following. So the engagement and the metrics are brilliant in that sense. I had one question really. We've obviously been discussing Plas Tân y Bwlch and the Ysgwrn in regard to marketing, and obviously we need to market it so that more people come on the journey with us, especially volunteers. Do you think there's enough capacity to ensure that digital marketing is in place for these specific fields? Is it actually enough? Marketing specifically, creating content for these channels. It's not just a matter of getting a video ready because it takes a lot of time. And I'm just a bit concerned that the capacity is not going to be there to support where we want to be when we want to market the Ysgwrn even more than we are at the moment, and Plas Tân y Bwlch, of course. Thanks, Ellis. I know that the Ysgwrn has specific capacity that they've been using separately to the engagement section with marketing. I think that's been really helpful, and that's something to think about in the future, that we bring in additional capacity either externally or as a project in order to undertake that work. I think the other thing to think about is with regard to the Ysgwrn, who are we marketing to? Because I can see opportunities to be able to market it to different types of audiences, because sometimes we know that we're interested in our culture and heritage, but you'd be surprised how many people outside of our parks culture has an interest in that, and it depends how we frame that in a way that draws them in. So, because when people visit the Ysgwrn, they can, whoever they are astonished with how special the place is and how we portray that to somebody who doesn't understand the culture and who haven't been to the area before. So there's even a greater audience that we can attract, certainly. Thanks, Helen. Okay, Tim. Thanks very much, Chair. I have to say this report is fantastic. I really love to see how much detail is in here, and to me it looks as if we're reaching a lot of targets. It's great to have these metrics here. Do we have any idea? There are always a debate between quality and quantity, and we have lots of people looking at the sites. Do we have any idea, without looking in detail at the comments, what sort of impact we're getting through these? There are some, sorry to be blunt, but some nutters criticize what we're saying. But are we able to educate about, and do we learn from what we're going to do in the future? And influencers, are they really worth the hassle? And if they are, for me, as somebody who's out on the mountain, there are lots of people who could call themselves influencers, and they can create a lot of risk for people on the mountains. For example, going up Grib Goch in the snow in trainers. Do we need to concentrate on things like that to make sure that safety is something that we address better, in specifically on the Grib Goch? Thanks, Tim. With regard to the question about feedback, I can respond to it in the sense of TICs. What we've been doing this year is working on getting people to visit the sites without the staff who work there knowing about it, and then giving us feedback on that. And then we use that feedback to tweak and improve the service when we get the feedback that requires that. I can't respond to the question regarding the Ysgwrn Plas, because I don't know if John or anyone can respond to the question in relation to that. Can I just come in on Tim's question? You asked what the effect of this is. Where we started on this path before COVID broke out, and I think our social media in Eryri has been crucial in sending out the important messages, and then we had a more focused arrangement where there were pre-booking procedures in place in Pen y Pass, and that through Helen's team was extremely successful, and we saw that the traffic almost disappeared, not totally of course, but that's down to clever communication. I don't know if you wanted to comment on that. No, I totally agree. Yes, we do communicate really well, to be fair, and in a very clever way. I think that communication can have a big effect on people if it's done in the right way. But going back to Dilith's point, of course, we have to be realistic about what capacity we have and how much we can influence people's behavior when they visit the park. The second that you had in relation to influencers, I think working with the external agency has taught us a lot. And there are two ways of working with influencers, really. The first one is where you pay them, and that's what the agency did. And I wasn't very impressed, really, with the results that we had from that. The other way is to think, well, we have a fantastic brand in the park and people want to work with us. And so Johan Gwilym has actually taken the lead and looked for people who reflect what we want to reflect as a national park, but with quite a lot of followers on social media, and that's what influencers are. He's approached them and asked if they want to work with us on the summer campaign this year, and they've all come back more than willing to work with us, because what we're able to offer is the park's brand, and so they're happy to do it for free as well. So there is a way of working with influencers which can be very positive, and we can convey and get our messages out there in a more extensive and way, and there are ways in working with influencers that doesn't achieve that. So it's just a matter of being careful as we go on that journey.
Before I pass to Ivan, Jim wants to come in. Yes, when I want to respond in terms of PLAS, I think that there are two sorts of audiences with the PLAS, the people who use it as a bed and breakfast, and the feedback that we get is like from a place like booking.com, and tells us what we do wrong, what we do well, and then we can act on that. Also, of course, we're looking at conferences and aware of the work that you and Willem that can lead to new on the PLAS. I think that it's a bit too soon to say how that's working out, since we're only just starting on that process at the moment. Thank you. Thank you, Iwan. Ivor. Yes, good morning. Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Helen for the work of such high quality, and the report really is worth it's something worth your pride. Just looking about the webcast of Eryri, this leads me to think, and I've said this previously in the past, that now it's starting to go. The telephones are taking over now, and reels, and children are looking at their phones, looking more at reels. Is this being developed? Talking about TikTok, okay, that's off the menu at the moment, but is any sort of work done at putting information on reels, because that's what children are looking to? That's my first question. Yes, definitely. One of the things that we have been we'll be focusing on this year is Instagram. We can see that there's a great growth in Instagram over the recent years, and more than anything too, in general, it's a very positive platform, which is different to Twitter and Facebook. So it's a nice platform for us to work on. So yes, we're starting to do more and more work on that. And what I've been trying to do is working with a team to develop the skills on that side of things too. So yes, brilliant, thank you very much. The second question, it relates to the ambassadors. Is a certain amount of work being done, having some sort of links with the 6th year in schools in Conwy and Gwynedd, with relating to the ambassadors course? I know that a lot of schools offer things like Duke of Westminster's. There's a definite contacts being made with the 6th year. That's the age that we want to try to catch, in fact. Is it Generation Y or Z, D, Gen Z has work being done linking with Generation Z. I think that is a really good point relating to the ambassadors scheme. What I'm aware, most of the work's being focused on more on businesses and local people. But I'll look into that in terms of kind of 6th form, definitely. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ivor. Thank you, Helen. John Pugh next. Yes, thank you very much. And thank you very much to Helen and the report, as usual. Yes, although I've had support with the change of the name, I'm sure that Eryri was everyone's looking at that from the Maoris in New Zealand, turning a lot of names in New Zealand to Maori. That's what's happening here. So thank you. It's not just it's seen in Wales, but throughout the whole world. And the word already shows we're a different country under a different language, not just in Wales, but throughout the world. I was looking at TikTok. I'm a great fan of TikTok, and 46,000 have liked it on TikTok. And this shows that this is the thing that young people mostly look at. And yes, thank you very much. and perhaps we need to make more use of social media as the way forward in this world. If we want the world to come to us, we have to go to the world and show that what we have and move forward. Thank you, John. Thank you very much. A lot coming through on the news about TikTok. Thank you, Helen. Thank you for the report. And then everybody accept the report from Helen. Everyone happy with that? There we are. Excellent. Thank you very much. Right, to item 10 now, minutes of the Plas Tanabulch Management Board. And Tim, do you want to report on that? Yes, we go through the work. Clearly, we've heard earlier about the financial situation, so I won't go into that in detail. But there'll be a meeting of the group after this to discuss this further. Some points that come out. We had quite a bit of difficulty this year and last year, but we have decided that we want them again because of the damage that's been done and the risk in the future. So this is something that's happened. So they lost their deposit and they've paid for the damage that they've done. But very disappointed to hear that the staff were afraid of being in the building during the night. So I'm very glad that that they've gone from here. The situation with the hydroelectric situation is improving. It's working better, as I understand, but there's still costs coming in terms of maintaining the reservoir. There's a reservoir and a dam on it, and we have to look after that. And it's important that we do this. There are substantial costs relating to this. We all know about the challenge that we've had, which is going to come to cut costs and raise income. A lot of things that have been done by the National Park contributed to this, but we find it very difficult to make cost savings and increase income in Plas Tanabulch. The costs are substantial. There's a report that's been done on the building, the work that's being done on people who are looking after the work on these buildings that doing for us. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of pounds to get this place to a situation to keep the water out and heat in. It's not building, hasn't been built well. Surprise how many people built it. They think generally builders, particularly were at work. The challenge of COVID, inflation, and whatever comes next have been a major one for Plas Tanabulch and have hit the income, and also what other things we can do here, and also the substantial challenge with staffing and recruiting and keeping staff more recently. The meeting this afternoon is going to be a difficult one, definitely, and we're going to report back to the full board in April with suggestions of people coming into the past. Ewan, is there anything you want to add to that? Have I covered everything? You have summarized the situation. I have nothing to add. There will be an opportunity for the full authority to discuss this in the near future. But I can't emphasize more. It is very difficult. The situation is very fragile. We have income that is not enough to cover our costs. We have substantial costs to maintain the building and difficult decisions to be made. And I'm not looking forward to discussing this. Thank you. Yes, I'm sure that we can ask questions from members. Are there any questions from anyone for Tim? No. I'm sure we can depend on you to look after the Plas in the meeting later on. And thank you very much for your work, Tim, and the group related to the Plas. Thank you very much. We'll go on to item 11, therefore, report of the Asset Management Group meeting on the 30th of November. Tim, you on reporting on this again? Yes. So just took out for this meeting and chairing it. The report is in front of you. I'll just pick out one or two things that you need to be aware of. We talked about Llyn Mair already. There are issues with cyclones. If we could get the big major rainfall to get the water out safely, this is being considered a high risk, not just because it's fragile, but what's under it as we are sitting in the Plas and other places. So there's a risk for people if something bad happens to this reservoir and the wall which holds the water back. So this is something that we discussed in detail. We're looking into getting the siphon to get the water out quickly. It's similar to what we discussed in Llyn Celyn recently, but on a smaller scale. And the costs here are substantial. We have also talked about this building. I've touched on this already, but discussion has gone on with Cadw, and can we get more lead in cap things one way or the other? And also the issues with the chalets and roads and things like that. These were discussed too. And Hafod Eryri came up, quite good news that there's no further damage to the building itself. It hasn't deteriorated much considering where it is. That's a surprise, but the government's money is fenced around it. So we're doing work there. We have looked at developing a 5-year plan and more, looking after what we have and the finance behind that. And we have asked to have a traffic light system to see what situations we have a high level of risk and so on, and also how the buildings help us to achieve what the park is supposed to achieve. And as a national park, we discuss the tariff in the car parks, how these should be, and looking at what's happening with COVID and inflation and so on. So that's where we are at the moment. We can see here what we have appointed and starting to move forward on, and also, as I mentioned, about the strategy for the authority, which will be coming in the future. So thank you much. And any questions for people, I'm happy to pass them to you and to answer. Thank you for your work again, Tim, and for the report. Does anyone have any comments? Joe, do you want to come in on planning? Joe?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question again about Plas Tân y Bwlch. I've just been having a look on the booking system, and I don't know whether it's purposely done or whether it's thought out, but you can't book one night. You have to book a minimum of 2 nights. Are you losing custom because of the lack of availability of one night stays?
This is something we've been looking at. And the costs are high, people coming into one night. And it's a balance we have to take. And that was the decision taken at the time to limit it to 2 nights. But it's something that we can look at if there's more flexibility we can do. And
are you able to see how many people have tried to book for one night and found it unavailable, or is that not something that you could see?
I think that it's possible to look at this, but we can see how busy it is and see if the difference between number who want to stay and number of booked. We can see inquiries, number of inquiries on the site, and this is something we can look at.
Brill, thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments? No, everybody happy? Well, with that, the meeting comes to an end. Just